Hello, and welcome to Fusion Writing, where building character meets creating structure. This is our map day, where we go a little bit deeper into the topic for our bonus week. Because this is the fifth Monday of the month, we get to have a little bit of extra fun. So let me pass you on through to Victoria, and she will go through what she has prepared for you. Victoria?
Hello, my fellow writers. So, as we lined out in the introduction yesterday, what I want to take you through is when you have that little initial baby idea and you're thinking to yourself, that is a really cool character idea. Or maybe something happens and you capture a thought and you think, wow, that could be a very cool story, but I need to get those details down. What I want to share with you is the way that I do that. Now, this is just my worksheet. Take the idea and adapt it to yourself for whatever works for you. But here's how I do it. Give me 1 second and I'm going to share my screen. So what you're looking at is what I call my character development grid. It is a very simple 3-part worksheet. The top part has 8 lines, and this is where I would record my initial thoughts, things like my idea for a character name, which something I collect in my Zettelkasten is I have a whole section in my 6000s that is just labeled names. It's what you would call a pool. There's no number structure or anything that organizes it. It's just one little section, and I collect names that I think are interesting. Names like Agnes Mundus. What could that be? I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. So collecting names, collecting ideas, those all go on my note cards. But as far as my worksheet goes, when I have one of those ideas that comes a little bit more fleshed out, or maybe it's got just a little more meat to it, I'm going to grab a character grid and I'm going to use this in order to flesh it out for myself. So the top portion, I'm going to write down maybe that name. I'm going to write down as a backstory, this person that I'm thinking of was only raised by their mother, and it was maybe a relationship that was rocky and unstable. It's any of those little details that just spark your imagination. That's the key piece. Anything that sparks you to want to write about it, that sparks you want to dig into that story, that's what you want to record in these top lines, because that's going to provide you with, number one, a little bit of a memory for how you got the idea, and number two, a little bit of a push because you want to get back to it and write some more. That's where the muse, that's where the inspiration comes into play. You're just capturing those little details up top. If you go to the middle section, you'll see it's labeled research, questions, and tasks. There's 13 lines there, and each line has a checkbox. I like to think of this as my homework. So whatever I've written up above, the middle section is where I assign myself tasks to explore those initial ideas. So for example, I might have up top a note that says, my main character idea, her name is Samantha, and I have an idea that maybe she is afraid of horses. That's just my idea. Maybe I was watching a program or I read something and I thought, ooh, a fear of horses sounds kind of cool. I could do something with that. So I just write those details down. I'm going to drop down to the research questions and I'm going to record my initial thoughts about that. Maybe my first research question is horse phobia real? So I'm just going to put that on my line next to a checkbox. And when I have some time and some interest, I'm going to go look up, what do you call horse phobia? What does that look like? What are the symptoms? How do they play out? Those are going to be some of the research questions that I'm just going through in trying to figure out who this character is. And that's when I'm creating my cards. Now, we're not going to get into that now because we're just talking about our initial worksheet, but you get the idea. I'm going to take the things up top and I'm going to assign myself tasks to unpack them down below. Now, what if I have a practical question? Maybe the question is about a plot twist. So maybe I've made a note to myself that this character survives a brutal car crash. Maybe down below in the research questions, I'm going to assign myself a task. If this person survives this car crash, how did they do it and what does it mean? That's going to tell me to get myself over into wherever I do my drafting. It could be a Word document, a Google document, Scrivener, wherever you draft out those quick ideas. And maybe I'm just going to write a little bit of that chapter and look at it and think to myself, okay, if this person survived that car crash, what are the ramifications and what does that maybe mean? Again, I'm just thinking out loud to myself. A final example is, what about something like a specific detail? Maybe up top, I've made a note that this person is a fisherman and this fisherman has something to hide, and maybe they hide it in a cooler where they've got bait stored. So I might drop down into my research questions and ask myself, how many hours does a cooler full of ice keep something cold? It's a practical question, but it could have bearing on the story. So again, I'm just using those research task boxes as a way to remind myself of the kinds of things that I might need to know for backstory. I might need to know for a plot or a plot twist, or I might need to know in order to better understand my character and how to flesh them out. The third and final section, which is the bottom third of the page, is just labeled notes, and that's exactly what it is. Maybe I'm listing out that character's friends and family members, kind of a loose genealogy that, okay, this is the main character and this is her sister. And then maybe her sister is married to the guy who's the problem. I'm just going to sketch those little details out so that I remember my thought process when I originally was thinking about my story. So that is just an overview snapshot of how I use the character development grid as a place to capture those initial ideas, as a place to assign myself tasks. Maybe when I'm having a slow writing day, I just want to try something different or new. I'm going to go look at those tasks and say, ooh, I think I could do something with that. And I'm just going to go do that research, fill out some research cards and check those boxes off. And then the section down below is where I'm making notes about, what could this mean after I've done the research? How could I potentially use this or make it play out in terms of maybe a 3 or a 4-act story structure? I'm just making notes to myself about why this might be relevant either to a current writing project or maybe to one that I'm thinking about. So my challenge to you is, take this sheet, make it your own, craft your own version, and start thinking, how can you start, number one, collecting those early ideas so that they don't get away from you. Number two, using assignments or homework for yourself, if you will, to develop questions and tasks that take you deeper into that story. And then how do you save those notes and ideas off the bottom that just keep you in that mindset, so you start to think about, well, if this is what I've learned in the top 2/3 of the page, what does that mean next and how might I use that? So the character development grid is my gift to you. Feel free to take it apart, restructure it, use it however you will. But number one, get those ideas on the page because they won't stay in your head forever. And number two, file them away in your notebook, your note cards, whatever system you choose to save it in, so that you have them for later when you decide to come back to that story. Everything that you need is at hand. So with that, I will turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Kathleen, and let her take you through some character traits.
Thank you, Victoria. That looks really useful. I can't wait to print out a few copies and keep them on hand for characters as they come along. And I'm going to cover some character development too. And mine goes directly on to note cards, as you will soon see. Mine has to do, my offering for today has to do with the where in your awareness, in your character's awareness, is the character trait that you're centering your story around. Maybe your story depends on dependability, and your character is not going to be quite as dependable as those who need them to be dependable. And why did they fail? Was it just something that, they never thought about being dependable? Or was it the case that they thought about it and made a selfish choice instead of being dependable? Those are two very, very different things. So let's take a look at a couple of pages out of my book, Writing with Emotion, that will give you an introduction to the concept of where in your awareness is a character trait. So I'm going to share my screen. So I'm going to call your attention to the two diagrams. We're going to talk about both of these. Up here at the top is what I mean by where is it in the conscious level of your character? Right here in the middle is what we call the zone of awareness. And this area is where you're actually hearing three different voices at the same time. One voice is saying, it's like the good angel sitting on one shoulder. Oh, you should do this. You should do this. And the other one's like the little devil sitting on the other shoulder. Oh, you don't want to do that. You want to do this other thing that's going to be more fun. And then there's the voice in the middle who's struggling between these two voices. This is the guy who's struggling between what am I going to do? This one says, oh, be good, be good. And this one says, you don't have to be good. But we know what that's going to lead to. So that is the zone of awareness. That's when you're consciously aware that are you going to be responsible? Is your character going to say, blow it off? So if your character blows off being responsible, that meant that that was right smack in the middle of their awareness, and they made a choice to not follow through. Now, what if instead didn't think about it? He's not very good at remembering responsibilities. Maybe he put it down on a calendar, but he forgot to look at the calendar. He's just not all that good. He might nag himself about, oh man, I got to check my calendar. I might be in trouble if I don't look. Then we say it's a wing trait, because if he messes up, he's going to make a mess out of things. And so we call it the zone of chaos. Well, we can take a look at voices here too. There's the struggling voice that's saying, oh, I should look at my calendar. And then the other voice says, just doesn't do it. It just fails to do it. So what the I did it and I'm proud, whoop, that voice kind of disappears. And all you're left with is these other two. If it gets really crazy, your character might not even dream of being responsible. He says, sure, I'll be there. Sure, I'll help you move. Doesn't even write it down in his calendar. Doesn't even keep a calendar, probably. It's like, oh, well, you better call him or he's not going to know he said he'd do it. It's just totally out in the blue for him. But you figure this out pretty quickly, and the other characters around this character know that they can't rely on him. Or we could go the other direction. The character is just for so repeatedly chooses the responsible choice and chooses to be responsible and show up on time. Pretty soon that's going to be what we call an anchor trait. And that leads to stability in the character's life, where, by golly, for the most part, you can pretty darn well count on George, let's say, to be there to help you move if he said he was going to help you move. Now, it may not be perfect. He might, oh my gosh, I totally slipped my mind. But that would be pretty rare. He's pretty solid. He doesn't have to think about it too much because he put it in the calendar and he routinely checks the calendar. So he's pretty darn stable in that respect. Or it could be all the way to what we call a base trait, where, by golly, you can bet on it. He's going to be there. You can totally count on it because he keeps his calendar. He looks at his calendar. That's just part of who he is. He wouldn't get up, wouldn't leave the house in the morning without having checked his calendar. That's just part of who he is. So, and there you just have the one voice, the voice of victory. So we're going to be putting these on a diagram, and we'll get to them more formally when we come to the class. But we use this wheel structure where we say, if the rudder traits, the ones that are thinking about, should I be responsible or not? Oh, last time I helped somebody move, my back hurt for 2 weeks. That is the rudder position, and we put them in our diagram along the horizon line. If he's like, what? Doesn't hardly thinks of it at all, that's what the wing trait, the zone of chaos, we put him here. And if what? Keep a calendar? Who keeps the calendar? It would be up top. If it's pretty darn solid, and you can almost always count on the character, we write them down here. And if it's just rock solid and you know for sure that your character is going to follow through, we put it down here in the base traits. Then we have a shortcut way of showing these, and we do that on a regular 4x6 file card. Here we have an example of the way that we would store our character traits on a file card. We would just give it the number. We'll go into those another time. and our character, and maybe a little bit about who our character is. And we use this starburst diagram to to arrange the character traits around the diagram. Up top in pinnacle traits, you can see our poor guy, Stuart, starts out with sincerity and loyalty, both being in the category of, huh, what, who? And even affability is just in the, maybe he might be affable some of the time. Poor guy, he's got a tough life. So that's a look at a character profile diagram, and that provides a quick way of capturing the character traits that you have assigned to your character. So you can just pick up one card and very quickly see at a glance the character traits that are related to that character and where they fall in his ability to bring them into his consciousness or his need to bring them into his consciousness. So I hope you will enjoy playing with the character profile diagram. Victoria?
Oh, that is excellent. Again, it always amazes me how well these things fit together because we really don't plan this. It just works. As you're looking at the character profile diagram and how to move those aspects around, that is a perfect time and place to start thinking about your character development grid. The two things really do go hand in hand. So take your worksheet or make your own, get those initial thoughts down on the page, and then grab writing with emotion and start looking at how to detail out that profile. It's a perfect A-B. A is the development grid. Get those first thoughts down so that you pen them down and you have them. And then when you're ready to really dive in and unpack and start developing that character, get yourself over to the profile diagram and start really dialing in what's going on with this person. How am I going to make this character interesting? And how can I start to challenge them so that they become especially interesting for my readers? Because as we like to say, without our readers, we wouldn't have a job. We wouldn't have a focus because there'd be nobody to read the books. So keep those things in mind and start doing those early pages and thought processes so that when you're ready to come back to it, you've got that raw material to draw from. So as always, thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it. Join us over in LiLLiPub for the conversation that goes on later in the week. Every Saturday, we have our 1 o'clock workshop, so please come join us. Share your work because we would love to hear what you have to say. And I mean, let's face it, you've got a whole team of coaches ready and waiting to give you great feedback and support you, because our job is to make sure that you write the best story that you can. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. Yes, thank you very much. And remember, visit us on lillipub.org. See you next week for the start of a new unit as we begin the month of August. Bye-bye.
See ya.